on the Great Seal of the United States of America on the back of a $1 bill. He says that when a hexagram is placed over the pyramid on the Great Seal of the United States, that the points point to letters that are in Anno et Coeptis Novus Ordo Seclorum. Those letters, when linked together, make the word Mason. Now, I don't know if that was actually designed that way or that just happens to be that way, but I will tell you that on the other part of the Great Seal of the United States, we see 13 stars emblazoned there above the eagle's head. Those stars are lined up to form a hexagram. In fact, dealing with the number 13, we have 13 stars. There are 13 rows of stones in the unfinished pyramid on the other side of the Great Seal. You have 13 berries on the vine of the eagle's claw. You have 13 flowers on that vine. You have 13 arrows. You have the phrase E pluribus unum, which has 13 letters in it, but E pluribus unum is a very revealing Latin phrase. And you know what it means. It means out of many, one. This is the concept behind a new world order or a new kingdom that's coming, and it basically represents they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men and be one kingdom. Literally, out of many becomes one. Manly Hall referred to in the Secret Teachings of All Ages that the six-pointed star was a figure for the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is a veiled reference to the Antichrist and basically is the fusion of the two opposites together that will bring divinity or immortality to mankind. If you remember, when the first Harry Potter book came out, it was titled in this country, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. But in Europe and in other places, it was referred to as Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Manly Hall goes on to say in the Secret Teachings of All Ages, these triangles symbolize the spiritual and material universes linked together in the constitution of the human creature. So Manly Hall is saying that these triangles joined together show the fusion of these two opposite kingdoms, the sons of God and the daughters of men. Now I'm going to show you an overhead picture of Washington, D.C. itself. When Charles L'Enfant first laid out the parameters of Washington, D.C., the lines formed what we see as a cube or a diamond shape. Now this diamond is divided in half by what is referred to as the point of transformation, and that line is the National Mall, where the Capitol building is and Washington's monument and all these things that we are going to see in this video. That is the line of transformation. This diamond-shaped figure is actually the two parts or the two triangles of a hexagram. And it shows the fusion of the two kingdoms. One triangle pointing upward, one triangle pointing downward. The fusion of the two kingdoms together, and the center point being the National Mall of Washington, D.C. The hexagram is also a veiled reference to the number 6. And it's in Genesis chapter 6 that we see the revealing of what this kingdom is going to be. Genesis chapter 6, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Now the sons of God are the angels, or the fallen angels. Some refer to them as the Nephilim, which means the fallen ones. They are the fallen angels who left, Jude says they left their first estate, and they mated with human women, and they produced offspring. Some people don't believe that, but every mythology and every concept in the world, in all civilizations, they all have a similar story that the gods came in, procreated with human women, and created a super race. They created the fusion of the opposites, or the divine man. And so that is the meaning of the symbol of the hexagram. So when we look again at the street layout of Washington, D.C., you see there an image there, and you can just barely make out the image of the hexagram there. Starting with the Capitol building, working down to a little rectangular park called the Lincoln Square, or Lincoln Park, you can clearly see in the points and the intersecting lines of this street layout here, the emblem of the hexagram. Now, one of the more interesting concepts behind the hexagram, and Da Vinci caught on to this, and he actually, I think he drew a graphic of this somehow, is that if you take two three-dimensional triangles and you put them inside of a globe, the points of those triangles would touch on the outer points or the outer part of that globe, at exactly 19.5 degrees. Now this number is really interesting to me because I want you to notice that on top of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., there is a symbol of Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. There's a statue of a goddess there. Dan Brown points this out, and it's commonly known that this statue stands exactly 19 feet 6 inches. Once again, if we look at the layout of Washington, D.C., you see the Capitol building, you see the White House, and you see Washington's monument. And those form a right-angled triangle, and the degree of separation of those two lines is exactly 19.5 degrees. Now, this is very interesting because every 4 years in this country, we elect a president. Sometimes it's a new president, sometimes it's the same president. Sometimes we like the president, sometimes we don't. And there have been a few exemptions of this, but normally, the President of the United States is inaugurated at the center point or the focal point of this right-angled triangle, the Capitol of Washington, D.C. The President is inaugurated, and it's done so by law every 4 years on January the 20th at exactly 12 noon. Now, I want you to think about this, because in the calendar, starting at January 1st, exactly on January 20th at 12 noon, exactly 19 and a half days have expired into the year, and a new president is inaugurated. Right underneath a 19 and a half foot statue of a goddess. Now, what is the hidden meaning behind this 19.5 symbolism? This is very simple. We go back to the pages of the Scriptures, and we find out, and when you take the measurements of the Ark of the Covenant, and remember, the Ark of the Covenant is the throne or a representation of the throne of God. And remember, Lucifer wants to rise up to heaven and sit on God's throne. When we look at the exact measurements of the Ark of the Covenant, we find that the surface area of the Ark of the Covenant is exactly 19.5 cubits. Notice what Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 2 says. Son of man, say unto the prince of Tyrus. This is referencing Lucifer. Thus saith the Lord God, because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am a God. I sit in the seat of God in the midst of the seas. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he is God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Naturally, you can sort of see the symbolism behind seating a president or the leader of the New World Order, United States of America, as sort of the grand authority over a New World Order. Now, one of the central symbols of the lost symbol written by Dan Brown was the unfinished pyramid and the illuminated eye capstone. If you've read the book, you'll know that they're running around Washington, D.C. with this sort of unfinished pyramid symbolism in the hand. It's supposed to be the key to unlocking the great mystery of Freemasonry. Actually, they're really not far from the truth here in this book, because it is a very significant symbol. We see it on the back of the $1 bill, the unfinished pyramid with the illuminated eye capstone being added to it. Manly P. Hall says in The Secret Teachings of All Ages, the sacredness of the triad and its symbol, the triangle, is derived from the fact that it is made up of the monad and the duad. The monad is the symbol of the Divine Father, and the duad of the Great Mother. So here again, get this symbolism. We have the concept of a Divine Father, which would be Lucifer, and we have the concept of the Mother, which would be planet Earth. The two of them joining together. The capstone is the Father. The base of the bottom of the pyramid is the Divine Mother. The bottom 2 points, that is referred to as the duad, represent the two strands of human DNA. The capstone, or the monad, or the Father, basically represents the seed of the sons of God, and these two now are joined together to form the divine man. In other words, they're saying that human DNA is incomplete without the addition of this third part. Let's look again here at the street layout of Washington, D.C. Remember, and I didn't point this out earlier, but the street layout of Washington, D.C. was laid out by three people. Charles L'Enfant, who we know was a Freemason, George Washington, who we know was a Freemason, and an interesting figure by the name of Benjamin Banneker. Benjamin Banneker was a very skilled, he was an African American, but he was a very skilled astronomer, astrologer, and he was a very skilled surveyor. And these three worked together to form what we now see as the layout of Washington, D.C. So you have two Masons and an astrologer, people who believe in occult ideas and occult symbolisms, and they have put these symbols into the layout of Washington, D.C. Now I'm going to show you a graphic. We're going to turn it so that you can kind of understand where we're going here. We see then the formations of an unfinished pyramid with a capstone on top of it. You see the bottom part of the triangle there forming part of Pennsylvania Avenue, and the illuminated capstone or the illuminated eye at the top of the pyramid, or the monad, or the great Lucifer as it were, represents the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Now remember, this is significant because it's at this exact location, the illuminated eye capstone on the unfinished pyramid, that every 4 years we inaugurate a new president of the United States. This same street layout is also part of another symbol, and Masons like to use multiple symbols upon symbols when they are writing their book without words that reveal an Antichrist coming in the last days. They like to use multiple symbols. And so on this layout here, where we find the unfinished pyramid with the illuminated eye capstone, the Capitol building, we find the symbol of the square and the compass. Now, the square and compass seems to be the most prominent and predominant symbol of Freemasons. They use this thing just about everywhere. You go by in your town, you'll find a Masonic Lodge. More than likely, you'll find the square and compass out there. Here's a quote. We talked about this on the last video. Here's a quote from Albert Pike, and he talks about the symbolic meaning of the square and the compass. He says, "The square, therefore, is a natural and appropriate symbol of this earth. The compass is an equally natural and appropriate symbol of the heavens. The compass is the hermetic symbol of the creative deity, the male, and the square of the productive earth, or the universe." And that's from Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. So here Albert Pike is revealing that the square and compass show the fusion, just like the unfinished pyramid with the capstone shows the fusion of the two opposite kingdoms mentioned in Daniel chapter 2. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. That's the meaning behind the square and the compass. So in our overhead view of Washington, D.C., you see Washington's monument, and from that point go out two lines or two streets. Then we look down to the Capitol building, and from that point outward or westward, we have two lines also going out, forming the square and the compass. Now, here's the interesting part of all of this, is that here we have the Washington's monument, which is known as an obelisk or Baal's shaft. It is basically Baal's phallus, his male organ. So the Washington monument represents the male. Remember, on top of the Capitol building, we have a 19.5-foot statue of a goddess, the female. Those two joining together to produce the divine man on planet Earth, or revealing the Antichrist. The square and compass themselves are emblems of the triangle in Freemasonry. The triangle, you remember, is a symbol that represents the number 3. And 3 is sacred in all of Freemasonry because it represents the divine man, or the union of things that are opposite together. When you go into a Masonic Lodge, you will usually find 3 candles there around the altar. These are called the lesser lights of Freemasonry. These 3 candles, or 3 lights, usually in the form of what's called a right-angled triangle, or a Pythagorean triangle. Pythagoras was a philosopher. You remember from the last video, we talked about him. Lived about 500 years before the time of Christ. And he's the one that devised what was called the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem, again, basically goes like this. The square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the other 2 sides. Hence, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And let me explain what this means in layman's terms. I'm not a mathematician, but I kind of get this. If you were to take a right angle triangle and take the first line in that angle, which would be line A, and you were to square the length of that line, that would be a squared. The bottom line of that triangle would be line B. If you were to take the